Okay, now we're being live streamed.
All right.
I don't know what happened, but I think it's working now. There you go. So,
Okay.
decriminalized nature. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming on for a discussion.
Yes. Thank you so much, John. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really excited to talk to you. This is my two most favorite topics of all time, psychedelics and
Well,
Bitcoin.
yeah. Well, as you probably know, they're high up on my list as well. So,
Yeah.
why don't you tell me about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just go through my spiel. So I'm just a pleb out here. Decriminalized Nature is a decentralized organization, just much like Bitcoin. And there is a central organization, decriminalizednature.org. And, I've been following the space for about 4 or 5 years. And our mission is to get psychedelic medicines to not be, to decriminalize so that it won't be, we won't be jailed for possession and so on. So basically it's just everyday citizens coming together. It started in Oakland, so just a little history behind it. In 2018, Oakland was the first chapter that really organized and put decriminalization, a pathway forward for it. And I followed that one fairly well. It was the first one, and basically their strategy was to go in front of council members, city council members, and get people to talk about their experiences with psychedelic medicines and how it's helped them overcome trauma or PTSD. Just tell them stories. And so that was successful, and they unanimously agreed. And what decriminalization means is that the city will not allocate funding for policing or prosecuting and jailing small possessions. So that basically was the first successful decriminalization measure that. And so from there, it spread in a decentralized fashion. Denver took it next, and then there was a couple cities in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a couple of cities in Massachusetts, most recently Detroit. And I'm from Washington State. I'm in Washington State, so Seattle just most recently decriminalized. I was in touch with that central, like kind of the committee here, and there's another small town called Port Townsend here that decriminalized. So that's sort of a decentralized sort of everyday citizen, just coming together saying we really want to have access to these psychedelic medicines without, fear of being jailed, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's within the United States. The first country that actually decriminalized was actually Portugal. And Portugal has a history already, like 10 or 15 years, where they have decriminalized psychedelics and found that criminal activity and so on, they've taken measures and it's actually declined after the decriminalization happened. So we have that history, and sort of we relied on that data point first to kind of go to the council members saying, instead of prosecuting these people, maybe we can use these medicines to heal people and to actually, they've found that inmates, they've done psychedelic studies with inmates, and the recidivism, going back into jail, into the system, dramatically declined. So there's data points like that, social data points like that we present to council members. And so that's the decriminalization movement that's been happening all over the United States as well as in different countries now. And most recently, so that was from 2018 to most recently Seattle was 2020. And then also at the state level now, Oregon passed two measures, measure 109 and 110. 110 was the decriminalization measure. 109 was that they would establish a Oregon Health Authority that would actually look at how to license therapists and how to structure the psychedelic therapy, basically. So that's still ongoing. And California and Washington, right after that, have very similar bills and measures that have gone out. It hasn't passed, but like in Washington State, we also have, we took a look at Oregon's model and basically said, okay, we'll allocate state funding, $200,000, and there's like a 15-person committee that's trying to figure out how to structure this legal structure. So that's the two different realms. Decriminalization is just basically saying for small possessions, we will, we do not want to have this to be a criminal activity. So, and legalization is more of, trying to figure out the legal structure around psychedelic medicines. So that's the two factions that are going on within the psychedelic debate right now. And yeah, I really wanted to, get out there because there's still a little bit of a misconception. I see some Twitter bots saying, legalize psilocybin. And I really want people to understand what that model entails. It's a clinical model. Basically that it's like having, your psychiatrist or your therapist be able to give medicine and there's a lot of big money behind that. And I really want people to understand the difference between what decriminalization entails and what legalization entails within the psychedelic world, because it's very similar to sort of the within Bitcoin, the Bitcoin versus the shitcoin sort of thing. Like when you're outside of it, you don't really understand what the difference is. But when you dive in deeper, you understand that there are differences and very critical differences in thought and theory and where the direction of that was going to go. So I really wanted to, get a microphone and start this discussion. And within Bitcoin, the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin Twitter, I'm actually getting a lot more positive feedback. Discussing sort of the intersection between Bitcoin and psychedelics, and yeah, and so I've been on this rabbit hole, and yeah, I just wanted to come talk to you. I saw your interview last year with Michael Saylor. That was like one of the first, I think, aha, like, okay, we're really doing this moment. So I want to thank you for that. Yeah. I had Bitcoin before that. So I found Bitcoin in 2015, and it was just a thing on the side. So Bitcoin was my alarm clock when, it just in 2020, like all the money printing went on. And so I was like, okay, that was my alarm clock saying, okay, I really have to go, I was digging down the psychedelic rabbit hole, and then Bitcoin started to, moon. And I was like, okay, it's time. I got to go figure this out. So yeah, your interview with, Michael Saylor was one of the first ones that I came across, and I was like, oh my God, we're really doing this. We're going. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
So I switched gears from, studying psychedelics to studying Bitcoin these last 15 months. And so, yeah, what a trip, man. What a trip it's been. It's and yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about that intersection between Bitcoin. Bitcoiners seem to, have deconstructed the fiat reality. So I think they're more open to psychedelics, but like, it's like, were these people that, did you, were you into psychedelics before you got into Bitcoin? Like, which came first for you? Like, I've kind of listened to your, talks over, a couple episodes on your podcast. And I'm wondering, like, for me, like, I think having the psychedelics experience helped me understand Bitcoin. So like, that was sort of but it's been an iteration of sorts.
Yeah,
so.
totally. Well, I have a bunch of questions to ask you on the, the policy side of things framework that you opened up with, but I do think it's really interesting. And as you said, like, I think a lot of Bitcoiners are starting to be interested in this domain of things, if for no other reason that, like, part of the fiat culture is basically all of these predetermined answers just disseminated, and people are expected to integrate them into the perspective, and so like whether people dismiss, like in the quote unquote mainstream culture, whether they dismiss psychedelics because they think it's frivolous and indulgent and the 60s and all that kind of stuff, or they just think it's illegal and bad and dangerous, like it's usually one of those two, and as a result they've just dismissed it outright. And I think one of the things that Bitcoin causes you to do is to realize that you need to pretty much reconstruct your entire perspective of like what is real and what is true and what is going on and how things are structured culturally, socially, economically, monetarily, et cetera, psychologically, spiritually even. And I think that means that, like, at some point, if you're curious enough, if your quest for truth is broad and true and like sincere enough, then you wind up in this domain of things because they're incredibly interesting. And even if you don't, like, even on the surface, like just the history of psychedelics is quite engaging. And so if you're at all curious, you're gonna be like, wow, I want to learn more about this. And if you go down that rabbit hole, you end up realizing that there's something of extreme value here. And why do we pursue Bitcoin? Because we believe it's something of extreme value, and it's worthwhile to us to both learn more about it and integrate it more into our life. And I think that's precisely the case with psychedelics. And there's a lot of really interesting analogies between the two domains that overlap a lot. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that because of your recent kind of going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But just to answer your question, my interest in psychedelics preceded Bitcoin. And that was just by virtue of a general curiosity for more, like, surely there has to be more than what we're being offered culturally and socially in the mainstream. And this led me down a bunch of different rabbit holes. And when I happened upon the psychedelic one by accident, a few friends and I were having a intended to be recreational trip with mushrooms. And at that point, that's how I saw them. I thought they were just another way to perturb your consciousness, to have, some fun with your friends. And overdid the dose accidentally and had an experience that was not in the realm of recreation any longer. And it was in the realm of something like quasi-spiritual and very challenging. And so after I went through kind of the hell of that experience and then came out the other end, I just woke up the next day and I was like, well, this is going to need some investigating, So I go on Amazon and I buy all the books available on psychedelics and watch all the videos. And then, in 2008 and 2009, I spent 3 or 4 months down in the Amazon learning about ayahuasca shamanism and that kind of stuff. And, it's been a ongoing inquiry and practice since then, because the psychedelic rabbit hole is, basically endless as well. And I think also one of they're very conducive to one another, because once you have that kind of quintessential experience and a space emerges between something deeply fundamental to who you are and the identity or how you conceive of yourself, and you realize that, like, as a result of that temporarily altered perspective, you see the world differently, and you realize that the world may not be precisely as your normal perception of it is. And so it opens you up to thinking, well, it could be different, and maybe even it should be different. And what is the reason why it is the way it is? What are the reasons why I perceive it to be the way I perceive it to be? And, what is the optimal perspective to have on how the world is, and what is the optimal ambition to have for how I would like it to be and how I would like to act within it. And I mean, I think that leads you down an inquiry about economics and society and culture and history and philosophy, et cetera. And then you realize that the money is one of the primary things that constructs the culture, one of the primary inputs to determining what the outputs of the culture are. And once you realize how corrupt and broken the money is, you're like, oh my God, well, this, we got to fix this before we can really talk about fixing anything else, because this is so fundamental. And so I became a gold bug as a result, because at the time, that was the only thing to do. And then as I learned, like, I got exposed to Bitcoin, I was extremely excited about it from that perspective, not even from a financial gain perspective. And then, over the years, you realize that it's more plausible that it could work, because I guess initially I was like, well, this is a very cool idea, but how could it ever possibly work out? until, you know, you just become a crazy Bitcoiner and you find all your other Bitcoiner homies, and, you know, it turns into the cultural phenomenon that it is today. And it begins, at least for me and a lot of people that I speak to, it begins to dramatically reframe their perspective, and as a result of doing so, dramatically improve many areas of their life. And I think that's why we have these conversations. That's why when Bitcoiners get together, it's such a, you know, awesome time. And
it gets cosmic super fast.
And I think, you know, what's more profound than something that has such a dramatically positive effect on people's lives? And so, you know, hence my incessant interest in the stories and understanding what's going on here.
There definitely is some sort of a connection there with the spirituality. I mean, I think the fiat world was just going crazy, so I started mindfulness exercises, and you know, basically the whole minimalism phase. Remember that about 10 years ago, I sort of went through that to just you know, I was reading the Marie Kondo books and stuff, saying, you know, what do I need, what I don't need. So like you know, after 40 years or 45 years of living, you accumulate a lot of junk. So you have to, like, you know, chisel away what you don't really need anymore. So I think that exercise helped me understand what has value and what doesn't have value for me in my current life stage right now. So I think that really definitely helped me prepare. And Bitcoin kind of came into my life in 2015. And, you know, I didn't understand it at the beginning. I mean, I just, I met a guy on the internet, and he told me about it. And for me, I was just like, this is cool. It's like internet money, like, and I was traveling a lot at the time. So I was like, oh, I mean, for me, it was just like a bank on the internet where I can withdraw local cash from anywhere around the world. I was like, that's pretty neat. Like, if I can find a Bitcoin ATM, you know, I don't have to worry about, you know, money exchange at the airport and all that, right? So I was like, that's pretty cool. So to me, that was the level of my understanding. So I just had some on the side, and then I traded it, and the guy I was with got super mad at me. I made 15% or something like that. At the time. I was like, that's a lot of money. And he got super mad at me, and I was like, wow. And that was when
why did he get mad at you for trading it?
For trading. He's like, you only need to keep one Bitcoin, because I sold everything. I was like, I'm out, right? And then he got super mad at me. So I was like, oh, this motherfucker, he's really serious about this. So he had seen through it, but there wasn't, and this is 2015-16 timeframe. So there wasn't much educational material around. I mean, I saw some, you know, Antonopoulos videos, and actually, you know, I didn't really understand like the Greek crisis. That was the economic crisis going on in Europe. The guy I was with, he was, you know, British, and so like he was more aware of what was going on in Europe. So that like opened up my consciousness of the economic reality of Europe, and, you know, what's going on over there. And really, like, the Antonopoulos videos, it wasn't so much that I understood like all the you know, the finance point, but it was his emotion. Like he had his hand, and it was always like gripped tight. And I was like, this guy is mad. He's really, really angry at this system. And there's got to be a reason. So it was the emotion that, like, I got the connection first before the intellectual understanding of the global financial crisis. And then in 2017, I quit my fiat job because my mother was hospitalized, and I had to make a huge decision on whether to take care of her myself or to put her in a nursing facility. So, and then I quit in October, like roughly around October 2017. So it was the first big, you know, peak. And I was like, oh, Bitcoin's going up. Yeah. So, and then it crashed. So I was like, damn, you know, and that, yeah. And so I'd quit my fiat job. But I was like, I was fine. I you know, I thought I would just go day by day and figure it out. I made the decision to take care of my mother myself, because elder care in the United States is like, I can't afford it. It's 10 grand a month, you know, and that's really, I mean, the financial reality of boomers are just not in tune with, you know, what the financial reality of their care is, you know. And I'm like, okay, there, I have to do this myself. And this is before all the sovereign individualism and all, I caught up to all that later on, but like, I just had to make a decision myself to do this myself. And it was a huge decision. And yeah, it's just been, kind of floating there since. And I went back in 2018 after the crash, and I read up on psychedelics, like all the Terence McKenna books and whatnot, and just caught up on, the study of it. I had come across psychedelics. I'm from the Burning Man school. So, that was where I was originally exposed to psychedelics, 2004 to about 2014 timeframe. And I had, towards the end of that, like I had experienced a couple death experiences, very close, and I had to process that. And really, I did a couple, I was doing, and I had really high anxiety from those death experiences. My father had died, and I had some very close friends that passed away too in this like very short time frame. And so like I had to process all this like very suddenly, and I got really high anxiety because of that. And I went through traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as I went to a Thai monastery, Buddhist monastery, and did like a 6 month of like group meditation type of thing. And they were both helpful, but I think for me, when I went back to the desert, and this is the first time I had done a solo mushroom trip. So I'd done it with friends and connected that way, but like I had never connected with myself. And so I did a solo trip for the first time and really processed, and kind of overcame that fear of abandonment. Like, so the fear of death is just a fear of like abandonment. So that was the process that I processed, and the mushroom really helped me process that, myself. And so there's power there, right? And like I didn't the therapy and all that was helpful to have, and the meditation was helpful to reel in those thoughts, but really to be thrown into a psychedelic space and having to process everything, and deconstructing your entire life, and trying to understand what bits to keep and what bits to let go. And that's such a powerful medicine that I really want the access to these medicines without the state coming in to tell me how how it should be licensed, or it has to be gone through a therapist or whatnot. Like I have the power to commune directly with nature, and so I want to have that access. And so the huge debate, back to the policy thing, is that that's sort of the two factions that are going on, is this decriminalization movement where we're trying to be able to have direct access without the state trying to figure out a legal structure around it, versus the big money corporate backed I'm calling it mind pharma. So it's basically mind medicine, and there's a couple other companies that really are trying to patent how the therapy should go. And I'm of the opinion, first of all, that IP, intellectual property, is bullshit. But like, how do you take these practices that have been going on for thousands of years and try to patent that, and saying that that's the only licensed model that we're going to place in these states? And so that's sort of the fight that's going on within the psychedelic space. And it's very similar to the Bitcoin and shitcoin, argument. Like I had this tweet where saying that legalization is like CBDCs, right? So you want the state controls the, the structure, right? The money structure, or the psychedelic therapy structure, and versus Bitcoin and decriminalization, which is like, it's organic and it grows, and it, you're responsible for yourself. Yeah. You're responsible for your own mental health, as well as you're responsible for, hodling your money. Like That's the sovereignism that comes with responsibility. So that's the two like parallels that's going on within the psychedelic realm, and then the cryptocurrency, or like the Bitcoin realm. And you're right, like both arenas like explode into million different pieces like very easily. Like you end up rabbit holing with the psychedelics, like neuroscience, and cultural history, and like you go down the Mayan path and all these crazy things, right? And same with Bitcoin, economics, and spirituality and all this. Like, what is going on? There's just, because it's so foundational, like you said, in a civilization, it's like the base layer, spirituality, and the money is a civilizational base layer, and we're trying to change that. So I think I think that's why it just gets super cosmic very, very easily, and it gets lost. So but yeah, it's so fascinating, and the people in both spaces are so like amazing. They're all amazing people. Like I'm just trying to be the bee that's trying to cross-pollinate between the two, and say, Bitcoin, there's a lot of, psychonauts within the Bitcoin, Bitcoin Twitter. But, I also want to take Bitcoin back to sort of the festival space, right? And like, why don't we use, Bitcoin as a medium of exchange within a festival setting? Like, so that's kind of my mission and my vision of trying to, I'm calling it, what did we come up with? Soulside and Citadel, right? So, basically now, if Bitcoin is successful and over the years it, accumulates capital and like basically power for me to start my own citadel, then I can actually create a safe, psychedelic space that people can explore their own consciousness in. So that's sort of, that's, Bitcoin sort of becoming successful, and, like just in 2020, I was like, okay, there's a path forward in this now. Like Bitcoin has allowed me a path forward to, step forward into this, space and really be that pioneer species that like Brandon Quinn talks about, right? And trying to figure out, with Bitcoin as the foundational layer of money, and if we break down the construct of our fiat realities, and be able to become human again, and be able to connect, through psychedelics with yourself, your spirituality, and and with others as well. So I think that's a huge difference in like a therapy setting versus a festival setting, right? So a therapy setting might help you deconstruct your reality, but you still don't get that bond with other people or with nature, or like just be in awe of like a sunset, and so I think that it's important to try to make sure we protect this decriminalization space, and that's why I really have been starting to get knock on doors, and try to get a microphone to address the difference between a legality of psychedelics and a decriminalization model, because it is different, as different as maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So like I really want to discuss that, and really have and just like kind of just understand the path forward, and how this decentralized model, how we're going to organize under a decentralized model. I think that's sort of a big thing for me too, is like, we're virtually connected, but how do we organize, physical events, for example, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now, and in my journey with Bitcoin and psychedelics. And yeah, it's just it's exciting, it's like what an honor to like be able to be a part of this, right? So yeah, I'm just stepping forward, into the void, and vibing to see what happens.
That's awesome. You mentioned just how deep the two respective rabbit holes go, and they seem so interconnected, and there's so much overlap. And I'm sure metaphors and analogies many could encapsulate, or at least partially encapsulate, that relationship. But it might just simply be that they both deal in the most fundamental realm of value. And value is pretty much everything. I mean, some people make the assertion that the value is what's fundamental. It's what allows the material world to be engageable, right? It's that framework that allows you to choose one action versus another. And if you could maybe just simply say that psychedelics are a means of uncovering fundamental value within and in connection to everything else. So it's more of a personal value discovery mechanism. And Bitcoin is the primary fundamental value discovery mechanism in the interpersonal realm, right? So it allows fundamental value to be discovered there. And of course, like, the two are perfectly married, because the more you can do so in one, the former, say, the more it's expressed in the latter by virtue of the means that they communicate.
Yeah. And it's just very recently that I made that like discovery as well, is that, I mean, psychedelics is sort of like an inner value, like, extracting that inner value out to the world. And then also, money itself, like, if I'm, on an island by myself, money is kind of useless. It's only for a medium of exchange, or storing it for future medium of exchange, right? Like, money doesn't mean anything if there's no other being to trade with, right? An energy trading system. So I had that sort of that aha moment too, saying, okay, maybe, psychedelics, spirituality is sort of that inner value fundamental, and then the interpersonal, exchange, like the energy exchange system happens with the base layer of money. And if that is conserved, then the more energy that gets in, right? And it goes up. And I also have an engineering background too, so like hearing Michael Saylor explain that thermodynamic sort of like in that language really helped me understand like the whole Bitcoin system, because after that I went and read like the Bitcoin standard and layered money and all this, all the amazing educational material that's available that wasn't available in 2015. So now this time around, I was able to go much, deeper and much more spread on the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But it's been an amazing journey to try to learn and understand and go deep and find out that it's this value mechanism. And so I think that's where we're just all like, what's going on, and we want to understand what the hell is going on. Having that,
as you said, like you said it a while back, and I can't remember what precisely it was in reference to, but it's that process of, basically being like unformed marble, right? And then you take away things to reveal, the art or the person or the thing of greatest value. And I think both of those mechanisms are effectively or are the most effective chisel, right? Both for ourselves and for the exterior culture. Like they're the mechanism that permits us to determine and engage with optimal or like maximum value, something like that, or the greatest value.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Both of those things are incredible.
Yeah. And the minimalism and just throwing out, I think as a human, we change roles throughout life, right? And so as our roles in life with other people change, that our identity has to shift with it. So during transitional times, major life events, like you get married, your role is different, right? Or you have a child, it's completely different. So I think when these huge life events happen, death, right, is also a part of that process. And the modern world really doesn't really, I'm calling it the fiat world now, really, because the fiat is so extractive of that energy, right? So the fiat world has sucked all the energy out that we no longer have time remaining to address these life-changing moments. And so you're always just trying to keep up with it in the hamster wheel. And then the hamster wheel, when the inflation goes up, is 20% faster. So it's the fiat game is like, I mean, I think we've all figured out, I mean, it's going to end. So now we have to transition over into this new, you know, monetary system. And we see that, like, that transition coming. And so I think having that psychedelic, or the sort of the, you know, deconstruction of the reality that you can get with, you know, I'm not just saying psychedelic, meditation or spirituality, or, you know, any of these practices that help you kind of see through the bullshit and like be able to say, okay, what's really important for me? Like, what's important for my life? So having that mindset really helps you see this transition coming in the monetary space. And you know, for us, I think as pioneers, we need to sort of, okay, figure out, you know, what are the most important things that we need to address, right, at a social level, or as, you know, in the coming society. And, you know, right now we're sort of in that, you know, okay, that's individual citadel, okay, let's take care of our community, our family, kind of a thing. But I think as it grows, you know, I learned how to grow mushrooms by myself. Like, I learned it on the internet. And once you see how the mycelium, you know, grows, like, you just see it, like the mycelium of money, like Brandon's article is like, you see it. And so you see that growth potential happening. And I'm just like, okay, we need to, you know, step into this space. And then, you know, like, as an engineer, I'm like, okay, how do we fix these problems? Like, you know, we have social problems. We have huge social problems. So, like, how do we fix this with the new, you know, base layer? And, you know, it's gonna be ugly when the old system, you know, dies, right? Like, every death is traumatic. So I hope, and I think there is an urgency, you know, within the psychedelic space too. Like, after COVID went down, it was a global crisis, right? And mental health is all over the place. And so I think we are all stepping out and saying, you know, from, you know, underground, and speaking our truth, saying, no, we need access to these medicines, you know, as fast as possible, because the old reality is crumbling, and people need to understand, you know, and have a new relationship with the, you know, the changing world. So I think that's why there is a little bit of an urgency to try to get psychedelics available to people. And you know, I've had Twitter arguments with Novogratz, because he's a big funder of the Mind Pharma. Like, he invests in some of them. And so he's like, you know, we want to have these medicines, you know, accessible to as many people as possible. And I agree with him on that. So why are you sending lobbyists and trying to protect, you know, a patented practice, you know, a medical clinical model practice, and saying that, you know, a festival setting is not as valid as a therapy session, right? So you know, you know, with control of money, they're controlling the you know, what has value and what doesn't. So that's being imposed on us. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to fight back, saying, you know, and some people might, you know, want to have that therapy, and that's fine, you know. I mean, if you don't have any experience with it and you would rather go to, you know, a therapist and work with them, that's great, go at it, you know. But, you know, don't stop us from having these festivals and you know, doing traditional, you know, ceremonies and practices, and even some of these cultural, like, you know, I mean, the decriminalized nature, I mean, is like, the sign is like a peyote button, and then the psilocybin, like, and then it's the ayahuasca vine, right?
Right.
So
That's cool.
yeah, so that's the symbol in that. But, you know, there are native, you know, people that are saying, you know, these are our cultural, like, heritage, right? Why are you preventing us from practicing our religious rights, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think there is a fundamental, like, argument for the First Amendment on freedom of your religion or consciousness. and Bitcoin is the freedom to exchange with individuals, and without permission from the government.
I totally agree. And I think the answer here is you can carry over something from the Bitcoin and FOSS movement, which is make it open source, like, because the all of these medical applications are inevitable because these substances can be used in those settings for good, and I know, like Dr. Bill Richards, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's been in the space for a long time. He helped restart the studies in '99 at Johns Hopkins, and like he's beautiful man. He was around like back in the Timothy Leary days. Like he's incredible, and his heart's in the right place. But he comes from academia. And I shouldn't even say but, like he comes from academia, and he's been working within the scientific framework. And I think that's done a lot of good for helping like communicate to more rigid policymakers or in a certain generation who just completely dismiss these things and look at it through a more scientific lens, and it gives it credibility for that reason. So I think that's been a positive. But I share your concern that, like, if the legal meat hooks get into it and just like pigeonhole it or only allow it in a certain context, that's not good at all. Now, I can see some people making the case like, we'll medicalize it first, and then, broader legalization will come later as it becomes more normalized. And maybe that's true, but I don't think that's the optimal outcome. I think the optimal outcome is you allow all applications to flourish, and like maybe there's certain safety considerations, or maybe there's some sorts of considerations, but I know what you mean. And I know the people and the companies you're referring to who are trying to make this a walled garden. And I don't think that's the right approach, because it excludes so much beneficial practices and context for these substances. And as you say, their cultural heritage and stuff like that. So I hope there'll be a more open approach, because I think that's the way the free market finds what the best solutions are, rather than trying to at the beginning say, oh, this is the proper context, and we're only going to create a legal framework around that context. And maybe you're wrong. Maybe that assumption was incorrect, and you're leaving off a whole big area of benefit and use cases and value that the market might find and apply to these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want to knock on, MAPS, the I can't remember.
Disciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
Yeah, MAPS. I mean, they've done so much great work over the last 30 to 40 years, trying to get, their big medicine was MDMA for PTSD, and they've done really good work trying to get through the FDA, the trials, and it's not. But at the same time, these vaccines went out in 9 months, right? So like, how valid is that 30 year, trial, really,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but part of it too is like the argument of like, hey, the really special substances, just let us do it, obviously wasn't working, right? Like, and so like there had to be a back door of some kind, and maybe it's medicalization, I don't know, but like, just let us do our thing was not working.
Yeah, and exactly. I really don't want to, knock on these, amazing organizations that's tried to, navigate through the bureaucracy that like, to try to get. I mean, they're trying to get these medicines to the people that need it. So I don't want to knock their work, but but they have capitulated, to the big money. Obviously, they need funding as well. So they're all, I think, they are kind of leaning toward the clinical model, and that's fine. I think that is, and realistically, that's probably the first wave of clinics that happen within the West Coast, and I think that's great. But at the same time, I want to see parallel movement that psychedelic medicines are decriminalized, so that if you do use them outside of that setting, you are not penalized or jailed or whatnot, right? So that's the arena that Decriminalized Nature is trying to protect, and I really wanted to let people understand, really understand that difference between legalization and decriminalization.
So in those jurisdictions where, like you mentioned, Oakland and Denver, and some at a state level, where they decriminalized it by saying we're not going to devote like regulatory or policing resources to this issue, but like federally, like DEA is still a concern for these
That's right.
places. So
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
these industries can't still really flourish out in the open? Is
That's
that
right. Yeah. Yeah.
correct?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
like
Right now.
there's an underground economy, and people are more or less. I mean, if you watch your P's and Q's, you don't have to be that anxious about it, but it's certainly not like a free market of
Right.
services
Right.
bubbling up and all that
No, I
kind of
mean,
stuff.
like I can't publicly, start a psilocybin retreat in Washington State at the time, right? Because I don't have a legal structure to figure out, okay, what type of safety measure is, the state going to implement. And I think that's fine, as long as it's clear, if I have to jump through hoops, I'll try to figure it out. But at the same time, so there's a 15-person committee that's reviewing in Oregon and Washington State saying, okay, what's the rule, right? What's the rule of the game, basically? So I think we're just waiting to understand that legal structure that comes down. And then, we'll navigate through it. And because I really do want to, create a space available for people to process, there's, life trauma, right? And we've had this global crisis, and I think we're just reacting to that. So hopefully within the, and I do think it's this is the decade. I mean, I follow the cannabis industry as well, and how, Washington State was one of the first, legal structure that we had within the state. And then, now every once in a while, I don't follow it that often anymore, but like, 25 or 26, 27 states have various other legal structure. It's different shades of green, but like, there's medical and recreational and all this, right? So each state gets to kind of decide the legal structure around it. And I think that psilocybin will probably have the same, differences. And I was also thinking, this legal tender bills within the Bitcoin, like, I mean, is that the same thing too? Like, I don't really understand, like El Salvador, you're probably more familiar with the legal tender laws. And I'm wondering, like, like, so, how, value, or like what structure, like it's permissionless money. So why does there have to be a legal tender bill, right? It's that same sort
Mm.
of, yeah, I think that's the same thing, like with decriminalization and, psilocybin, I can grow my own mushrooms and eat them, right? Like nobody's stopping me from doing that. And yet, if I wanted to create a community around that, then I would have to have, because it is interpersonal, so the state gets involved with trying to figure out the legal structure around it. So I'm wondering if there's a parallel between legal tender bills and like, how the psychedelic laws are going to be sort of formed as well.
Yeah. Well, I think many of us would say, just removing the state would be the optimal option. And I
Right.
think a lot of people uh, with El Salvador, I mean, like, of course we cheer it on because it's a move in a direction that's aligned with us in a world that everyone is so far divergent from like what we think is right and good. And so like, of course we're cheering it on, but I think many of us would say like, compelling people to accept it, for example, as part of that bill, even if it's not going to be enforced or whatever, like instead of making it legal tender, just remove all regulations on money whatsoever, right? So that like there's no capital gains tax, there's no any other consideration. Use whatever fucking money you want. And that allow the free market to sort it out that way, allow people's own choices to
Yeah.
sort it out that way. I think, or and to your point, I mean, a lot of the Bitcoiners who basically look at Bitcoin as a black market money, it's oxymoronic to be like, why are we waiting for the white market seal of approval on the black
Right.
market money? Isn't that kind of like defeat the purpose of it actually being able to be a black market money in the first place? And of course, there's a lot of merit to that argument. So I would rather see not like the state, and this is wishful thinking, right? Because we're in peak fiat and peak statism,
Mhm.
at least
Yeah.
hopefully, right? And so
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I do believe it's
I don't
turning.
think,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't think
Yeah.
we're anywhere near like a dramatic reduction in the size of the state, like
Yeah.
anytime super soon. But hopefully, the pendulum starting to swing in that direction. But, my preference would be remove, especially for substances like this, where, there's no toxicity dangers. Like, there's dangers from not being prepared for the experience, but I'm more than happy to let the free market sort out what solutions are best and what providers develop and provide those solutions the best, rather than the state, which has no idea on it one way or the other, from on high, a million miles away, saying this is how you should do it, irrespective of your own judgment and what the patient or the participant needs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, we live in a world where people have lost faith in the ability for people's own decisions to self-organize, and we've deferred everything to some moral and authoritarian arbiter of truth that's like somewhere else, but for some reason we delegate everything to them. And no wonder things aren't working so well, because that institution could never have the data, nor never be sufficiently aligned with everyone's preferences to perform that role optimally. And so I think Bitcoin's going to...
central planning can never look out for everybody, right? So when you decentralize the decision making, whether it's money or mental health or whatnot, then I think it fits each individual situation much better, the free market, right?
Yeah, and people's own incentives will help sort that out. Like, people will offer solutions, and if they're poorly offered, then they will die out very quickly, because people will communicate the poor experiences there. The best ones will rise to the top. Competition will mean everyone's trying to improve the way in which they offer those services over time. And what I think that means is, one, the best possible solutions are made available for the current time. And two, the mechanism is there to make sure that we're consistently refining and discovering the greatest way of offering that solution, i.e. we're continuously honing in on the greatest value for whatever thing it is that we're engaging with, right? So what is the best way to offer this solution to a healthy 35-year-old male looking for XYZ out of this experience? Well, like, that will be discovered through the course of time if there's no impediments to it. And I think it will be discovered, it'll be discovered way better than dictating it or making assumptions about it and putting, artificial parameters in place. So that's what I'd like to see. I don't think, like I said, that's probably fairly idealistic, but the more we can remove and question the authority of the state in these affairs, the better.
I mean, it is transitional times, right? And I think I'm Gen X, so I'm caught right in the middle between, I'm peak Gen X, so like I'm caught between the boomer values and millennial values, right? Huge difference in value. I mean, we dematerialized everything within my lifetime, so material value, the boomer security material value versus this sort of freedom, and there's a reactionary, I mean, the whole fourth turning sort of premises, that generational theory, right, is I do believe it's true. I mean, I see it, and I see it, like, once you see, once, obviously when you do psychedelics, you see those cycles, much easier as well. So like, my mom is from the silent generation, so she understands. I mean, she was alive during World War II, so she knows the last transitional period. And doing your own shadow work, with your parents, right? Like, I now understand, like, some of the, the trauma she received, that the intergenerational trauma that's passed on, right? So I kind of like brushed a lot of this off, but like, my mom still like stores extra food, just in case, I mean, it's still ingrained in her from food shortages, right? So now, I'm seeing these, talks about, possible food shortages. And obviously now we're in wartime, like, mainstream media is bombarding everybody with Ukraine right now. So like, I'm just like, okay, maybe this is a transitional time. But also Gen X, as a Gen X, we're pragmatics, right? We really, we're the translators between the two generations. So, realistically, we would love to have, these decentralized models right away. But I do think that it's going to be over the next 30 to 40 years that this transition happens. But I think younger kids, the older you get, the time preference does go lower too. Like, so, like, for example, with cannabis, I mean, we just legalized weed 10 years ago, and then during COVID, it's now an essential business that stayed open, right? And, and it's the fourth biggest industry in Washington state now. That's within just 10 years. That's just a decade. So, the time, we have this new theory that we're talking about in on Bitcoin Twitter, but time dilation is happening, right? So that, is time being squeezed, right? Like more things are happening within a shorter period now during a transitional time. And so, and then with Bitcoin too, like, does it dilate time, right? There's all these discussion with Gigi and all this about, Bitcoin is time and all this, but for me, what I'm seeing is this like a time dilation where I mean, when Bitcoin 10x's at every halving, is that a time dilation that's happening? Like what's happening there? Like time does seem to be like compressing, right? So and technology development too. I don't know if you've read Alvin Toffler's like third wave series. Like, I don't know if you've okay, so that's basically the bigger, like the agricultural wave, the industrial wave, and then the digital wave. He coined the term information age. And so he predicted in the 70s that technology would advance so fast that human development cannot catch up with the technology, like the singularity and all this, right? So, and I do wonder, like, I mean, like for myself too, like I think of Bitcoin as a OS change, like of my brain, like how I'm going to save my energy for future trade with other humans, right? So how, for me, going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole was a full OS change in my brain of how I'm going to operate in the world, right? So that's a huge trend, and I swear to God, this is the last big change I'm going to do. Like I'm almost 50 now, and I'm like, I can't take it anymore. So I do understand, like, boomers, are lost. So millennials need to take care of their parents, right? And help transition into this new economy that's going on. So I think, at a big, big change level that, we are looking out kind of, understanding, how this is going to change. And we're all trying to just navigate through it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that metaphor of the OS change is very apt. And I think a lot of people feel that because it alters so much your perception and as a result, how you engage in the world. And I think, talking about this transition, speaking about the kind of uses or applications for, psychedelic experiences, you mentioned that this transition that we're going through, whether it's like the nasty transition of like from the fiat system to the Bitcoin system, or even maybe a broader overarching transition of like just things accelerating so much going to, God knows what on the other side. I feel like the fluidity or the flexibility that experience allows you to integrate into your perspective, right? Where you're not such a rigid defined identity, but you're far more able to embody different perspectives and see things from different angles and adapt better. Like, as is the case all throughout evolution, right? The more you're able to adapt to the changing environment, the better your chances are at succeeding and thriving and surviving. And I think, that is another potential application for the psychedelic experience as we go into this rapidly changing, nobody knows what's going to happen environment, is that being optimally adaptive to that is obviously going to be beneficial. And I think both Bitcoin and psychedelics will play an instrumental role in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two are very interrelated, and both are on a growth trajectory, right? So I do believe that this is the world that really millennials will, create, and I'm kind of I'm transitioning because, you know, I need to survive really. You know, and I'm just trying to keep up as, you know, much as I can. Right. But, you know, there's so much growth in both spaces that it's, you know, we need to have a decentralized proof of mind and have people, you know, everybody, you know, we have this amazing tool right now that's called the internet. So we can share our thoughts and ideas with each other, right? That's the free trade of ideas and you know, constructs and whatnot. So I think we're trying to all, you know, reach out and saying, you know, compare notes and saying, okay, you know, what's really happening here. And yeah, I really do think that I just recently finally read Leela from Breedlove's series over there with Mike Hill, and yeah, this dynamic quality, you know, the metaphysics of quality idea of you know, being sort of like, I think in tradition it would be like being in the moment, right? You're able to perceive reality as is much more clearly and be able to understand what has and what doesn't have value to your life now. And you can choose the path that represents, you know, more value for yourself and your loved ones, and be able to navigate much more clearly in a dynamically changing world. And when the value system of that external world changes from a fiat based, you know, consumer, a material, you know, to a dematerialized, you know, more of a, you know, millennials have different values, you know, they it's completely different. So I think trying to navigate this change, and I think that you know, when you look at the fourth turning sort of, you know, zoom out perspective, you see the pendulum swinging, you know, back and forth between centralized system and decentralized systems, or you know, materialistic world to a spiritual, you know, world, and so on. And I think we just, you know, move, you know, we go one way, we go too far, and then there's a reactionary period that we have to go back, and that's that generational theory, you know, coming back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll be interesting to see to what extent that theory is altered or holds up under a Bitcoin standard, where maybe the incentives to individualism and individual sovereignty are greater than they have been at any period in the past. And therefore, does that slow the pendulum? Does it make it hang out in one area longer than the other? I mean, notwithstanding, culture and the world and our reality is probably always going to have a cyclical nature to it to some degree.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be, you know, good times and bad times and growth and consolidation and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder what kind of a shape that will take when the base layer is different like that. And, you know, I to your point about this ongoing conversation, because it's not just like we change our OS and we change the means of storing value and expressing value out into the world and becoming more adaptable for this. But as you said, I mean, a big part of orienting that OS is all the different feedback we get from other people that are expressing things, information, opinions, perspectives. And, you know, most of this happens for a lot of us on Twitter, right? This is where we get to see like what signals are being sent out, what signals are good and true, and what's noise, and how do we parse it. And, you know, it's just amazing that, I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like a coincidence that like all those things were almost necessary for the other one to take hold. And now they've all taken hold together. And it's just this torrent of mix of things that are coming together to really, you know, conjure up something hopefully good and beneficial that's going to see us through into the future better than anything we've had in the past. And, you know, I kind of get it. I think it's a good thing that someone like Elon has just taken over that aspect of the mix, because it probably means there's going to be a greater like a freer flow of information and perspective on that platform. And that's probably going to stand us in good stead. And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the zeitgeist is there too. I think Elon put a tweet out about psychedelics benefiting, you know, people. So he's already kind of spoken proactively, and I kind of already knew that with the tech lords, you know, I mean, a lot of
so many of them know what's
Silicon
going
Valley is
on
built
there.
on
Yeah.
LSD. So like, you know, Burning Man's just, Silicon Valley festival, really. So like,
There's a
I
lot of
know
people in the psychedelic closet.
yeah, I mean, Jack obviously has had, he's to me, I'm like, I know he's had psychedelic experiences. So I knew I would be safe in this, within, Bitcoin. And that's precisely why I moved over here, because I was like, I had seen the mycelium money, and I was like, okay, I need to go find these people. So I just came over here, and I still represent Decriminalized Nature, but I was learning from you guys about Bitcoin, and then went down the rabbit hole, and then you guys, with the podcasts going on, I listened to a lot of it. I broke my like rule of no tech on my walks, but like on my daily walk, I was like, I need to learn. So I was like, have my podcast on. So you guys have been my imaginary friends for the last 15 months. And now
that's amazing.
now
You mean you weren't turned away by the toxicity?
No, I was like, I want to know what these guys are talking about. So I love your HODL gang, the talks. I love those. And I was like, man, how do I get into, like, I have penis envy. I want to get into this circle. So I was like, I'm gonna go knock on this door and see, if we're talking about, and also, yeah, I mean, get the word out. I mean, I really, I do have a vision of, these, citadels that form, and yeah, I want to be connected to the people that are like psychonauts, right? So I plan, when I can, start organizing festivals. We actually have a capital within my Burning Man Circle community. We have a campground up here. We bought an old Elks Lodge, and it's perfect for a very small festival. So, I want to start, finding the people, the sort of the burners and the psychonauts that, want to try to do a festival on Lightning Network, right? So Miami is this huge conference, but I'm looking at trying to start a small, smaller gathering sorts of, a physical space that we can all connect and kind of unplug and reconnect with, ourselves and each other and nature, and be able to provide that space of, have that space available to the community, within Bitcoin community and the psychedelic community. So yeah, I'm really looking for others that kind of think this is a good idea. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see some legal structure that comes down. So I'm really looking for help, to see if anybody else, wants to see if we can navigate through this and have a vision, co-create a space together, really. And all I want, I'm one of those people that like just dive in and then like learn about it later, and the best way for me to do that is to work with other people, because people have amazing knowledge, and when that's shared, it's unstoppable. And yeah, I'm a big proponent of open source creativity. And that's why I think Bitcoin is going to do well, because it is open sourced. And decriminalization, I think, is a much better model than a legal model, because like you said, you can have different competition, like competing models, and saying, and really reacting to the needs of the people, instead of like authoritarian pushing down on saying this is how it should be done. So let the free market figure out what the best needs are for the people, and what, and then we react to that, in a dynamic quality fashion, so that we're providing the actual needs of the people, instead of like trying to push something down. So
yeah, I totally agree. And based off of a lot of conversations I've had, over the last 12 to 24 months around this stuff, people thinking a similar way. So I suspect, some people will be reaching out to you, or at least at some point there'll be a lot of interest in working on such plans together in some capacity, because I think a lot of people recognize the importance and the value that could arise from doing something like that.
Yeah.
And I wish you well on that. I know you got a
Thank
hard
you.
stop in a few minutes, so
Yeah.
we'll sign off here. But I appreciate you taking the time to come chat with
Yeah.
me and share your journey and your experiences and your thoughts. And it's been awesome to connect with you. And I wish you the best. And we'll talk again soon.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to let people know you can just I'm on Twitter at DecrimNat. And you can DM me anytime. I'm home just taking care of mom all day. And if you want to like integrate a psychedelic experience and, having problems trying to understand it, I'm available. So just, just give me a shout out. And I might not be able to get back with you soon, but I love hearing other people's experiences. So, if you want to share that with me, DM me.
Incredible.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again, and
Thank
take
you.
care. We'll talk in the future.
Thank you so much, John.
See ya.